Hi Living Guardians, welcome to another Strike Showcase. At hero level difficulty, what we're looking at this time is Lake of Shadows, the revised Lake of Shadows Strike. I am running a Voidwalker Warlock. This is season 20 footage, but the idea of the strike and its changes still applies for future seasons. I am using Void Warlock with Nezarec Sin. I am running a Void SMG and a Void Machine Gun to be my barrier for volatility, volatile round stuff for the anti-barrier. And I'm running the Raid Exotic Shotgun from Root of Nightmares to deal with the Unstoppables, because it's unstoppable barrier champions. With that said, right off the bat, we have enemies to deal with in this strike, and we can see right off the bat the changes. So this strike, like Arms Dealer, was revised for Lightfall. And I think both were done well, but I understand why Arms Dealer was the more popular of the two revisions. Because right off the bat, it's not the fact that we're facing enemies right away, I don't mind that, but it's the fact that we quickly see it is an escort mission. Because in the original strike, we just ran through this area to get to the start of the strike proper. Well, now this is the start of the strike proper, nothing wrong with that, but with that being the case, when we see what we have to do, quickly a lot of people tend to roll their eyes because escort missions in gaming are not the most popular things ever. Combine that with the fact that it's basically quote-unquote reuse content of the Savathun Throne World public event of Escort the Payload, and you have people thinking, lazy revision. And I don't think it's lazy, I think it's fitting, but I understand why when he's looking at the reused assets and whatnot. And reused assets, by the way, in gaming isn't a bad thing. I think it gets a bad rap. But regardless, here is the trope for the first half of this strike. We have to escort this payload and activate it to cleanse the blight. What I do like about Lake of Shadows, just like I like Arms Dealer, the narrative isn't rewritten. The narrative is continuing what we have already done. So much like Arms Dealer, this strike acknowledges that we've done this already. But given Shadow Legion's occupation and invasion, we are dealing with a new threat of taking blight in this area. It's more invasive, hence why we have to cleanse it right here just to get to where we used to go. And we don't have taken blight balls anymore. We have like a deeper, more nefarious corruption that requires the use of this tech that our Cabal allies have kind of instructed us in use of, more or less, and we're kind of field testing at the same time. So I appreciate how the narrative continues the story, and it doesn't just retcon and rewrite the story as if it never happened before. I like that stuff. So now we're getting to the strike proper, more or less, where it would have been anyway the strike proper for the original Lake of Shadows. Again, no taken blight balls, but taken blight to deal with. So another big change to this strike is the fact that it is predominantly a Cabal strike with taken boss and some taken support, if you will. There used to be a predominantly taken strike with some fallen enemies as well, because the fallen that lived in this area, the EDZ, were trying to contend with the taken at the same time we were. Now there's no more fallen, which I guess you could say continues the narrative of the fact that the Shadow Legion came in and wiped everything else out. And it's mostly Shadow Legion Cabal that we're dealing with. So with that understood, we move in and we are dealing with taken here, but outside of the corruption of the blight that we cleanse, after doing that, the second half of the strike is pretty much just Cabal until we get to the boss fight itself. So escort missions, everybody loves them, and by everybody loves them I mean nobody loves them, but I think it's the fact that we used to be able to speedrun the strike so fast that the slowdown feels extra jarring for people who are used to be able to just breeze through the strike. And don't get me wrong, I like the ability to be able to breeze through stuff or speed through stuff if you know what you're doing, and an escort mission nullifies that, right? No matter your competency and efficiency in it, you really can't speed it up any faster than the payload never stopping to move, right? Or never stopping moving, or whatever you want to say. We can't go any faster than that. And they're not always going to be able to do that given the way the enemies spawn in and whatever else. Especially with a random, match-made team. In any case, part of the Problem is, you don't really feel like you're competent in the first half of the strike because, or that your competency is being rewarded because you're stuck at the speed of the payload. Don't forget, once the payload gets to its destination, you have to activate it. Now, for the second payload, we can't activate it until we deal with the mini-boss that will be spawning in where that blight ball is. That's not a normal blight ball, by the way, so it doesn't count. But anyways, so I think it's jarring mostly because you used to be able to speed so quickly through this strike. In any case, I don't agree with the fact that's out there on the web that people feel that this strike has been padded for the sake of being padded and this feels like unnecessary artificial padding. I think it's the closer of the two to that concept, but I think it's a combination of, like I already mentioned, we can't speed through the strike nearly as fast as we used to be able to, and it's an escort. But again, I don't believe in the concept of reuse assets equals lazy or just padding for padding's sake. I think, you know, it makes sense to use something that narratively would be there, right? Instead of making up a whole new thing that was never there before. But anyways, this is a mini boss. This Taken Chimera pretty much acts more or less like the Taken Chimera that used to be in Gambit, including these shielding nodes, and also the Taken Chimera from the Dreaming City. So if you fought either of those two, you have an idea of what it's doing and how to deal with it. It's not health gated, it just, you know, it doesn't go immune until you do something. It has shielding that happens that you can drop as fast as you're able to continue damaging it. It is a chunky health bar. It reminds me of Neomuna's Tormentor mini boss in that strike, because that mini boss has a huge health pool itself. And this is very similar, in a very similar concept of an open room to deal with it. So I guess the trade-off is it's a big enough room that you don't have to worry too much about the fact that it's got this crazy health bar. You can constantly get behind cover, put down rifts or whatever else, and nuke it down as safely as you're able, and that's always good. So once we deal with this mini boss, we have to activate this payload for it to go off and cleanse the blight to allow us to progress, and that's the end of the escort portion of this strike. So really not that bad. But it's also kind of the end of Taken until we get to the very end of the strike. So now we're going to be facing pretty much purely Shadow Legion Cabal. In moseying through, there is no pathway differences. You know, Arms Dealer had pathway difference, minor pathway difference in the beginning. We don't really have that here. We just have the fact that from load-in, we are in the middle of it, right? We're in the thick of it from the very beginning. So this room still has the Taken launcher wall stuff, so be careful of that, but there's no Taken fighting on in here. So it's just, again, the Shadow Legion. I don't mind it, but I do miss this being a predominantly Taken strike, right? I feel like some of that thunder has been robbed from the Taken and having to share this much limelight with the Shadow Legion, even though thematically it makes sense. Well, now that we've gone through that, we're at the most annoying section of the strike, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people agree. We're back outside, and we're dealing with two Threshers. The air support of the Cabal is very annoying in Destiny 2, and it's no different in this particular strike when we have not one, but a total of two to deal with that potentially you can get to spawn in nearly at the same time if you just move really far ahead and ignore the first one. But it's there kind of to try and force your hand in dealing with it, and therefore attacking it and taking up time and ammunition depending on what you use to attack it with. And this is the most padding for padding's sake I'll say that this strike feels like it has, is these Threshers. This second Thresher is going to trip me up. I'm going to misunderstand its health in terms of thinking it's dead, and therefore I kind of move forward. And then between its rockets hurting me and then the Shadow Legion, I'm going to get, you know, KO'd here, but it's not a big deal. It's relatively safe to get me back up, and we have dealt with the Thresher just after the fact. In any case, you just gotta be careful of the boopers in addition to all of this heat, and you'll be a-okay. So after that, we only have a few rooms to go, in all honesty, right? It's a couple of rooms here, and then another mini boss, and then a couple of hallways, and it's the boss room. So all the while, Shadow Legion Cabal, stealing the limelight from the Taken. But what we're doing is we're just basically fighting along the same pathway and the same concept as when it was purely Taken in the original strike. However, this is leading to a second mini-boss. This strike had 0 mini-bosses originally. So the second mini-boss is nowhere near as health heavy, but is in a much smaller room, and it's a Tormentor. And Tormentors in smaller rooms can spell disaster if you're not careful. Now, I feel the health pool for this Tormentor, given the room and the confines, is just right. Doesn't mean it's going to be a walk in the park, especially at higher difficulty tiers, but as long as you are aware of how to deal with Tormentors and understand kind of, not so much its tells, but what's going down, you'll be able to kind of somewhat breeze through this encounter, as long as you're not caught outside. Because the moment it starts, the doorway closes and you get joining allies if you're not there. The big thing about this Tormentor is that Taken Eyes will spawn in occasionally as you lower this Tormentor's health, and those Taken Eyes actually hit decently hard, so you definitely want to try and prioritize dealing with them amongst everything else. But given that this Tormentor's health isn't crazy, if you know how to deal with a Tormentor, you can burn it down pretty quick. As you can see, this Tormentor is pretty much almost done with. But if you're not careful, or if things kind of go awry, it can be a quite dangerous thing to recover from. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the, you know, the proper health pool and everything else, and that's a dead Tormentor. And that's basically the strike, because we kill some stuff here, we go through a couple of hallways, and we're at the boss room. Again, no Taken Blight to destroy, but in its place, we're going to have this kind of Pyramid Tech Diamond thing. This will start the boss fight. So once you clear out the room, the boss fight doesn't start, you got to destroy that Pyramid Tech Diamond thing. This boss is interesting, because as much as this strike might feel pageant for a lot of people, the boss really isn't. The boss has a proper health pool, and you know, can take punishment properly for a boss, right? In its original form, we could burn this boss down the moment it kind of spawns in, because it wasn't built to deal with our crazy power that we've gotten throughout the years. But this one is. We have a proper boss fight, and I'm always for a proper boss fight. But the boss isn't really the most dangerous boss in the game. Ads spawn in that can trip you up, Taken Knights spawn in that can trip you up on the outskirts, along with these Scions, and the boss can boop you and can tether you, and also shield bash you very rudely. But aside from that, once you get a handle on the room, the boss isn't the hardest boss. Which you notice I'm destroying these these Pyramid Tech Diamond things. The room is not full of blight. There's blight on the very outskirts, but that's about it. If you don't destroy those diamonds, the blight will encroach onto the center of the room and give us a smaller room to maneuver in and fight in. So what I like about the rework of this strike boss is that not only are we dealing with the boss and the ads, but we're also kind of dealing with the room to give us and keep us having room to maneuver properly. So I do like that. And the boss isn't health gated either. There's never really a time that the boss goes immune from, you know, at a certain health point or whatever. Just taking goblins can make the boss immune, but that's not a health gate, that's just an ability of another Taken unit. Just pay attention for those diamonds, pay attention to the room, or the enemies in the room as well, and the boss goes down easy enough. So that's Lake of Shadows Revised. I do enjoy it. I know that it's the least popular of the two, and I can agree with that, but I still do thoroughly enjoy this revised strike. Share your thoughts in the comment section, hit that subscribe button, be part of future conversations more easily. And until next time, Guardians, don't forget to commend your fellow Fire Team members. Stay frosty.